we first fall in love. And if that doesn't work out, we have the most painful heartbreak we'll ever experience. But here's the punchline. That is 100% necessary.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure and excitement that we introduce our distinguished guest for today's podcast episode, the brilliant Dr. Ram. Thank you very much for being here. Dr. Ram's remarkable career spans the domains of neuroscientific exploration in the visionary... Wait, let me start that again. I'm sorry. I get so nervous at the start of it. I know, but I get so nervous.
Before we start, I want you guys to just take 3 slow breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. At your own pace. How do you guys feel?
So is that a tactic you use for public speaking and to feel comfortable?
Yeah, well, I make the hosts feel comfortable because sometimes it can be intimidating.
It is.
And so often I find myself calming down the hosts, and then it turns into a beautiful conversation because I know excitement levels are quite high, but also you kind of there's tension as well in there, right?
It's like the nervousness just before I go to say, because I've only been doing the podcast for a couple of episodes now, and this nervousness and this fear that kind of builds up inside of me just before saying the introduction. I feel like my tongue gets so tired. I know exactly what I want to say, but it just doesn't come out in the way that I want it to.
Yeah.
But those 3 deep breaths.
You know what's fascinating? The second before we're talking, it feels so normal, like a normal conversation, which is how a podcast should be.
Yeah.
And then when it's 3, 2, 1, your eyes just change into some glare.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, shoot, I have to act a certain way.
Yeah.
Which you don't want to. You want to be that.
They call it the death stare right into the
That's what I feel like is happening, and then it's everything just kind of shields over. But we just want to welcome you to the podcast today, Dr.
That was the
Dr.
best.
Ram.
That was also the best introduction ever because he kind of took over and does what he does.
Calmed us down a little bit.
And for context, he is a doctor in
neuroscience.
So he helps us with our brains and the way that
they connect to the heart.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being on today. We really appreciate it. There's so many things that we want to get into. But I think first and foremost, how did you get into neuroscience? What was the passion or the driving force behind it?
Mm-hmm. So initially, I had no interest in neuroscience whatsoever. My interest was in nature, so I studied animal behavior and physiology. I was actually, for my master's, I was doing brain surgery on sharks. And
really?
that was fascinating to me because they had an extrasensory perception, which is electroreception. And I was fascinated by non-human senses. So I was actually working on sharks to study how the human brain works, because when sharks evolved, they have remained the same way over millions of years without any change. And so if you look at the first instance where the brain evolved, you can then extrapolate to how we have these 2 cerebral hemispheres and all the things that we can do. It is fascinating how it evolved from such a simplistic structure. And that simplistic structure is still one of the most amazing survival machines out there, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they still exist while we have evolved into greater complexity. So it was a fascinating bit of research, but to answer your question, how did I get into neuroscience? That was my entry point. And then I had because I spent so much time in nature, I was exploring, the deserts of Australia. I went to the Amazon, I went to Africa. And in these explorations, I was in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. And I happened to have a near-death experience there. And from that point, I got very fascinated with what happened to me. And
can you share that story?
Yeah.
I
can. That goes in pretty deep. So,
the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, the Cliff Notes. So I was how I ended up there was I happened to just book a flight, the cheapest flight out of Australia.
A true traveler.
Yeah. And so I arrived in Bali, but Bali seemed too hectic for me. So I started island hopping all the way east and ended up on Irian Jaya, which is the west side of Papua New Guinea. So Papua New Guinea sits just above Australia. And I was looking for further exploration, so I surrendered my passport to the Papua New Guinea military, who took me on a military aircraft over the highlands. So there's no roads up there, there's no road access, because every time they tried to build roads, it just slid down the mountain, so they just stopped building roads.
Terrifying.
Isn't it true that in Papua New Guinea, that's where the most, what's the word, civilized humans live? Or is that the way to explain it?
Yep. So
The people who have like never seen Western people before?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it may be 2023 right now where we are, but there it's millions of years ago. So they still live that same way.
So fascinating.
And so when I was there, you could still, there were tribes that are headhunting, cannibalism, things that we can't even imagine are still present there. And I got really sick up in the highlands. I was in this chateau built by the missionaries, and it was very spooky in there because I thought there might have been some massacres that have happened in there. So for whatever reason, I got very sick in the room, and the only way I knew to alleviate the pain was through meditation. So I started meditating, and at that point, I got so deep within myself that time and space seemed to fade. Wow. And the full details I go into in my book. But when I recovered from that experience, my mind stretched back into reality, and I didn't know what I was experiencing. So to understand what I experienced, that's the reason I stepped into neuroscience, to reverse engineer an explanation for what happened to me. So it's taken, almost a decade.
Is that kind of like, in layman's terms, or people who didn't go through something like you did, where it's like, maybe you're out in nature one day and you're like, okay, why do I stress about all these things in my day-to-day life? I'm out in nature, maybe someone is sick or just died, and you're like, let me just be happy. And then you think that way for a certain amount of time, and then the next day you go back into New York City or LA and you're back in the grind, and you quickly just lose that, and it's more stress, more, like you said, back into reality. And is it kind of like you figuring out a way to compartmentalize both brains?
That's a very interesting way of putting it. The mind has only so much capacity before it collapses. So for most people, we don't stretch the mind to that point. Some people experience a state of no mind, which is in moments of flow, where all thoughts subside and they're so immersed in that moment where like anything is possible. And that is addictive, because when you experience that, you want that sort of heightened state again. So usually activities provide that. But outside those moments, which are fleeting, we don't really get to experience that. So that's when you describe, maybe someone goes on a retreat, they experience serenity, and then they return back to city, and then they go, life's tough. So you'd want to be in a state where, regardless of where you are, whether in a retreat, whether you are at home with your family, whether you're at work, whether you are in just daily life, you want to be able to have that state on demand.
So now, is that like a state of gratitude and optimism, or like what is that state?
I personally call that state love. It has a neurochemical composition. So in a state of love, there's more oxytocin in the system. And so what you experience is more connection, more openness. So the mind is open, the heart is open. And in that state, this might be relevant to you guys, where when someone falls in love, their ability to do things like just expands exponentially. Like, for example, someone might move to another country and learn a new language, and they do it so quickly, so easily. They don't think twice about that, right? But when you're not in love, to think about moving to another country, learning a new language, all of these things seem daunting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's like the support that you have. Like we talk about this quite often actually, is like I grew up in a very tumultuous household and I don't feel like I had any kind of stability. And now coming and us being married, I have this newfound level of stability, whereas which I feel like I am capable of so much more than I perhaps was alone. And I think it's so fascinating that that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is a neurochemical state that allows us to do that. The mind is able to produce chemicals that is neuroprotective, neuroplastic, and neuromodulatory. So I know these are big words. I hope I didn't lose anyone. But it's the nature of the brain under stress is very different to the nature of the brain on love. So when we are stressed, our vision is very narrow, and it's a tunnel vision view of the world, and we don't see other possibilities. We are self-preserving. When we're in love, we are much more compassionate, we're much more giving, we are open, we are free. And so these states are where we are able to do things that we probably would not do otherwise.
So when you talk about this, you know, you say it as a state of love. It's not just romantic love, though, is it? Is it just kind of like a love for yourself, a love for the moment that you're in?
I was gonna give my experience from us being married and from what you're saying is like I was building the app before I really fell in love with her. And I think when you're single, it's kind of like a job in itself. Like I think in life, the two pillars of people's goals are like finding a career and making money where they don't have to worry about money, and then like falling in love. And I think like for most people, those are like the two big things that they look to achieve. And when I fell in love with her, I knew like half of my worry and half of my stress was taken care of. Like, oh, I'm in love with somebody. I don't have to worry about finding a partner or going on first dates and like the ups and downs of dating. And then it just allowed me to put all of my attention and all of my stress into work. But it also made work so much easier because I love the work. Like I don't know if it relates to work, but you're saying oxytocins and your passion, because I love my work and I was in love, it allowed so much simplicity and ease to kind of build the brand. Like my attention is all on that, and it just feels right.
Yeah. So it's a little bit limiting when I talk about love, because in the English language we have only one word for it, right? What you're describing is a love for work. You're describing a love for family, for home. There's so many expressions of it, right? So for me, I do like to compartmentalize it into something relatable. And the Greek mythology actually offers a beautiful way to express this. So in Greek mythology, this love that I talked about, where there's oxytocin in your system, whether it be self-generated, that is called agape. I don't know if you guys heard of this word before, but it is...
I think it's in Jay Shetty's book, actually.
Yeah, so it is a love that is self-replenishing. It is coming from within, and it's not external. Some people call it unconditional love. So that's agape. Then we have philia. And philia is the love of community, of tribe, maybe your workplace. You're so passionate and you're so connected with the people around you. That is philia. It's your tribe. And then you have eros. Eros is intimacy. It's that sexual tension that you have with someone else. And that is also a love in one of its expressions. And then the fourth way is called strogi, which is the love of family, like from a parent to a child. Like you may experience this in so many ways. Like I don't know if you have brothers or sisters,
Yes, we both
but
do.
you love them very differently to the way you love your parents.
Yes.
And you love your friends very differently to the way you love your workmates. You know,
Yeah.
it's still love, but the expression of it or the quality of it is different. We don't have words for this in English.
No, we don't. We just have one word. It seems kind of boring comparatively, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating. So now, when people are single, they're trying to find love, and I think from what I see and what I experience, my own experiences, we put pressure on ourselves where we're like, okay, every first date I go on, I'm hoping to fall in love, and I think that maybe between the pressure and the just odds of falling in love, that it doesn't work that way. Where, correct me if I'm wrong, does it have to happen naturally? Like those emotions that you feel of you don't know when you're going to fall in love. It doesn't have to be on a first date. It could be literally anywhere. But I feel like people who go on these dates put the pressure of, oh, I want to try and fall in love on this date, when I don't think you can try and fall in love. It just happens.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I think the sacredness of love is being diluted by dating apps. So the expectation of maybe meeting someone and maybe that's the right person, that if you do that over and over again, the experience of it gets diluted. So there's only so many people where we can genuinely give our attention to. And if we are doing that and stretching that over a number of people, the likelihood of that decreases. So you have more people, but less likelihood.
Yeah.
You know. And if you have perhaps one or two people that you're potentially checking out, and you might find with one it's much easier and things flow naturally, and with another person it might be you might be compatible in other ways, but it is a bit forced.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why I it's interesting to see when people want somebody to like them back or want somebody to love them back because they think they love that person. And when you chase somebody, say they do come and want to be your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, and it's not real, why would you want that? Why wouldn't you want someone who wants to be with you where, like you said, it's easy, it's not forced? And I feel like that's what a lot of people do today is it's like they feel pressure by society or pressure by
Or an
their
internal
friends.
pressure
Or
as
an
well.
internal pressure where they're like forcing some type of connection.
I think this is really interesting in terms of like this paradox of choice that's going on within dating apps, right? As you said, there's so many people and our intentions are still the same, but it's just kind of being diluted across all of it. How, from a scientific basis, how does this paradox of choice affect people as they're going about in dating apps? Like you said, like this dilution, how does it, is there like a scientific basis as to like why people are not finding love because of the endless options?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, never before in history have we been exposed to so many people, so many connections. So even though we have these options, our brain hasn't adapted to this level of options. So ideally, people, grow up together, they get fond of each other, and over time, some form of relationship develops, and there's a sort of emerging maturity to that. Love also ages over time. So, and then eventually you see two people growing old together, and they're just as much in love from when they first started.
Oh, I love those stories.
Yeah. So it's not that same butterflies that they felt early, that's changed, right? So in old age, how they feel love for each other, the brains have co-evolved together to create that dynamic. So in the modern dating world, I live in Bondi in Sydney, Australia.
I lived in Bondi too, on
Oh,
Carl
yeah?
Lewis Street. Yeah.
That's where I live.
Wow.
Could you imagine if we lived in the same apartment? I can't
That's
even remember
crazy.
the name of the, or like the number. I think it was 43 Carl Lewis Street. I can't remember, but
Oh, wow.
Stop it, really?
crazy.
Worlds collide.
That's wild. So in Bondi, like, because there's so many options, what they consider long-term relationship is around 3 months.
Okay.
You know, because the turnover is so fast. And what's missing in those moments is that when we go through challenges and we work that out, that builds trust, rapport, and a understanding of how another person behaves. But if we skip that step and rinse and repeat with multiple people, then we're not forming genuine connections. We are searching for something, but when we find it, we reject it at the same time. So that's the paradox of choice, is you reject what you want.
And then also, we've talked about this a couple of times, and also this like grass is green. You said rinse and repeat, which I think is a really apt way of describing a lot of the dating scene all around the world. Is it this grass is greener effect where they go, okay, well, I'm searching for this thing. I know in my heart and in my mind that I want love, and I have this prerequisite of kind of what it is, and either if someone doesn't kind of match it perfectly, or this idea that like maybe, just maybe, the perfect person is right around the corner. Do you think that that's kind of contributing to it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the grass in green is greener effect is a result of the dating apps. If we didn't have dating apps, we'll probably be more considerate and more invested in different relationships. But because of dating apps, and I'm not dismissing dating apps, right?
No, but actually,
yeah.
what you're saying, and I don't know if you're doing this on purpose or not, it's validating what we're trying to do. So
It's one of the key differentiating factors, I think, of First Rounds on Me is like being able to focus on one person at one time.
So I don't know how familiar you are with it, but kind of our motto is like retraining people's brains to evolve with dating apps. Because like you said earlier, when dating apps came about, say 10 years ago, it came so quickly and everybody gravitated towards them without knowing how to use them. And I feel like that's why there's this big mess with them. And I mean, I would like to get into this with you as well. One thing that we push, and this is what worked for us in my experience, was the sooner I met somebody in person, that's when I knew if it was potentially going to be something I wanted to pursue further, or if I knew right away, like, okay, you know, I went out with this person, but it's going to stop here and I'm not going to waste her time or my time. And I wanted to know the biology and the science behind like pheromones and energy. And for me, when I was present with somebody, that was really a deal breaker of, okay, this is moving or not. And I think a lot of people now do too much due diligence and spend too much time vetting people through the phone. And I feel like if you do that, it's just going to lead to a misunderstanding of who that person really is, or
Well, this rinse and repeat
or
situation.
you're
that you
just going to get
spoke
so bored with it that you're going to just not meet them overall. You're just going to be like, okay, what's the point of actually meeting you in person?
Yeah, and I think the other factor that is adding to this confusion is these images, or like I'm not on dating apps, so but I actually went on 4 dates on dating apps when Tinder came out.
How'd that go for you?
Badly. So the last one, I could see the other person calculating in her mind whether she was going to sleep with me tonight or not, and she had.
How could you tell that?
Like,
Because he's a
That's a
neuroscientist.
superpower.
so, like she had 6 other people lined up that week, and I was one of them.
And you knew that it was out in the open.
Yeah.
wild.
I asked like, how many people are you seeing this week, and she said 6. And while we were in this conversation, I could just see her going, "Am I going to take him home tonight?" Like, you know, like
They're
that's
kind
sort
of
of
comparing you to,
the other.
The other
6
6
other
guys.
contenders.
Yeah.
and I'm sure that puts a lot of pressure on you too.
Well, I wasn't having any of it, so I got up, I paid the bill, and I walked off within 5 minutes. So
I applaud you on that.
yeah. So for me, it was just all the experiences I've had just wasn't what I was looking for. And so the problem with dating apps is you acquire an image before you meet the person, And so you have an expectation of what they are. And if they're not meeting that expectation, you think this person is not right for me. I mean, in Australia, for example, the average height on a dating app for men is 6'2", 6'2".
Yeah.
Wow.
The average height of an Australian man is 5'8". Like these two things don't match.
Deception straight off the bat.
Yeah, yeah.
And to that point, it's like if you are talking to somebody through the app for, say, a couple of days, and in your mind, you're like, oh my God, this person's so funny. They're so smart. They're so intelligent. But based off of what? Based off of their words through the phone. And then if you meet them, because throughout this process of 3 days, you're like, this is the perfect person, the most amazing person ever. When you do meet them, it sucks because no matter how great that person is, you set the bar so high
Your mind
that
has.
they can't live up to that expectation.
Yeah.
Even if they are so funny and so smart, you created this false impression of them.
Yeah, and then as the relationship develops, both people are trying to meet false expectations. So that is like heading straight headfirst towards disaster,
To a
right?
3-month relationship.
Yeah,
That's basically what it is.
And then you start blaming the other person of like,
Yeah.
oh, they lied to me of who they were on the app. It's like, well, you both weren't who you really were on the first date. And then over
Yeah.
time, the truth came out.
Yeah.
And you both resented each other because you don't like the real version of that person.
And part of the contributing factor is like we ingest things to change the dynamic, whether it be alcohol, whether it be, women on the pill. That changes like a woman's pheromones.
Does it really?
Yeah. And so it also changes her perception to who she's attracted to. And so what happens is if someone's on the pill, they might be very attracted to someone and they might end up getting married and then they have kids.
Stop it.
And then they get off the pill
What?
and they wake up next to someone going, I'm not attracted to this person. Like, what am I doing? So, I mean, you got to realize how much these chemicals are changing your physiology. Also, if you're drinking alcohol, you're meeting a person in a altered state.
Yeah.
And that the same person in real life is a little bit different. So you have to constantly go out to recreate that altered experience, but you're not actually in love with them. You're in love with an experience that they create.
Let's stay on this
So-
chemicals thing for a second.
He's like fascinated.
One word that we like to use with first rounds on me is chivalry. So getting back to pheromones and these chemical imbalances or balances, do women get turned on by a man who pays for a first date or like shows a sense of, I don't want to say security, but does the little things of opening the door, making sure like he walks on the outside of the street? Do those things matter?
To certain women, they do. I mean, you might be able to say in a better, from a woman's perspective.
Yeah.
But I think the cultural changes that happen, and each generation adopts to those cultural changes. And sometimes what was maybe very attractive half a decade ago is not attractive in
So those
2023.
things can change.
Yeah.
Humans evolve that quickly where they actually aren't.
Culture evolves and humans adapt to that change in culture.
Wow.
Our brain doesn't change that quick, but we change our behavior based on what's more optimal in that environment.
Wow, that's
Fascinating. How much does pheromones come into play in terms of like initial chemistry and attraction?
It's huge. I mean, it's
But it's subconscious, correct? Like it's not
Very
something
much.
that we're like really aware of on a conscious level.
so smell is really, really important. And it's like smell has a life cycle as well. So, for example, in the brain, smell is important for a reason of toxicity. So if we see a fresh apple, we go, wow, that's a really good food. We might ingest that. If we see the same apple and it's rotting, it has a different smell to it, right? We know this as gut instinct. And this happens psychologically as well. So if someone has toxic behavior, we have a gut instinct. We get disgusted by someone, right? So a lot of these patterns are so deeply wired into our system, and smell serves a purpose in our gut instinct. So instinctually, when we look at people, we don't know what's happening subconsciously, but we have a feeling. We might assess.
This like you said, a gut feeling of something where you're just going, oh, I don't know about that, and then you try your brain and your heart and your gut and your spirits, and it's all trying to like work together to try to figure it out.
Yeah. So there's so many layers that is happening before a thought reaches conscious perception. So, we might think, oh, this is our free will. We might think this is who we are choosing, but subconsciously, there's other things that are happening that is determining your behavior.
So when I met him, inside of my brain and my body, it was like making all of these calculations, and it was doing all these things before I was like, I had the conscious thought of being like, yeah, I do like it. Is that how it went? Really?
Yeah.
Wait, okay, one other thing, because I've always been really fascinated by this and I've heard it so many times. Does facial symmetry have come into play in the way that we kind of approach romantic relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone has a very symmetrical face, we have suspicions about that person. If there's asymmetry in the face, imperfections, we find that person more trusting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
It's counterintuitive. But
It is, as I say, it's very counterintuitive, but it's so fascinating.
But it's got to do with how we perceive strange things, right? So even if we take human movement, there's contralateral movement and there's ipsilateral movement. If I was walking with the same leg and the same hand moving in the same direction, like this way,
like a robot?
yeah, that does not seem natural. That's suspicious. But if it's opposite hand, opposite leg, that feels very natural. That's contralateral movement. The other one's the same leg and the same hand moving is ipsilateral movement. The moment we see that, we might not recognize what it is, but it's off. You're like, this is strange.
Something is weird going on here.
Yeah. So asymmetry is something that is biologically attractive.
That's so interesting to me. I'd always had this myth about, attractive people and the symmetry of the face and how it kind of affected people's perceptions of each other. But now we've heard it from not the horse's mouth. You're not a horse, but the horse's mouth. I was reading a couple of your blogs, and one of the most recent ones was titled "TikTok Silent Death of Your Brain Health," which I thought was so fascinating because I think we all, in some way, shape, or form, can understand how this monotonous swiping in both social media and in dating apps is kind of destroying our brain a little bit. Can you expand on the neurological aspects of excessive social media use and how it's affecting us today?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ways these social apps are engineered is they present to you something that hooks you immediately. And we all know this. When we do reels and TikToks, we always have a hook, right? And then people either have a long watch time or they skip. So initially when you open the app, it hooks you with something the algorithm knows that it will grab your attention.
Terrifying.
And then the next series of things it shows is things you're completely bored with. It has absolutely no relevance to you. So you're skipping through so many videos and it creates dissatisfaction. So then you're waiting for this dopamine hit. Where is it? Why isn't it coming? And then all of a sudden, the app knows, okay, now you're about to jump off, and it'll show you something that, provides you with that emotional hit. And you go, yeah, this is what I was looking for. And then it goes to that 90% cycle of serving you crap, basically, and then the one emotional hit. So that's how, if it was good content all the way through, we'd get bored, we'll disengage. So that's how the app keeps you on.
Got to keep us on a bit of a roller coaster.
Well, dating apps purposely do that.
I was about to ask if the algorithms with dating
if
apps.
you download Tinder, Bumble, Hinge for the first time, the first, I don't know the accurate number, but maybe the first 30 profiles you see, if you're a man, are like really, really beautiful women. And you'll go through them pretty quickly and they won't accept you because they're fake. And then, like you said, you're always going back on the platform to find those 30 beautiful women.
Yeah.
And they're not there. And then I'm sure here or there they'll throw a little nugget in there. But
Yeah.
that's what the dating apps do. And I'm sure they have brilliant people like you behind them putting these tools to use.
It's called a Strugen's law. This one.
What is it called?
Strugen's law.
Strugen's law.
Yeah.
Our app does not have that, but maybe.
No, let's stay different. Let's stay different from everybody else. That's the whole reason
Yeah.
we're here. All right, so like what advice would you give to people applicable to dating apps mostly, but also within the whole realm of social media to kind of combat the things that we've talked about just recently?
So personally, I'm not on dating apps, but also I don't watch any short form content. So even though I produce short form content, I'm not on TikTok, but I produce Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. I don't consume it. I don't think I have enough brain cells for that. Like, think about it. If in the space of 30 seconds, if I switched the context of this sentence 12 times, like you'd consider me like ADHD or like, just
Little loony.
random. Yeah. So the amount of context switching the brain does in a 8-second cycle, that is way too much. And so these apps are designed for an ADHD brain, and a lot of kids and even adults now are having adult ADHD. And so for them, this is great, but that is not a normal human brain.
Isn't this just catastrophic for the
Brain
world?
health.
Brain
moving forward?
development.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why personally I'm not on it. And I advise parents who have kids to not let them use this app at least until the age of 14. And I know from first-hand experience that parents who have taken that advice, their kids are so well adjusted. I see them down at the beach, they're in the water, they're playing around.
They're not socially awkward.
Exactly. And I can have a full conversation with them. But kids who are on this app, the parents vaping here and the kids are on TikTok, like you can't actually look them in the eye. Like they're so scattered.
And I see that for people around our age too. Like growing up, we didn't have social media, obviously. So we were out getting
My
dirty,
mum would chuck
getting
me out the
injured.
back and be like, go outside until 5 p.m. You know what I mean?
And I think now, I guess we're speeding up our adult ADHD, where I talk to people in their 30s and they can't look me in the eye or have a real conversation, and they have nothing to talk about because they're just used to this. And then I saw some study that said a kid in the United States, their dream job is to be an influencer, whereas like a kid in, say, I don't know, China or India, they want to be a doctor or an astronaut. And that also scares me, obviously, being an American, just how addicted the West is to all of this stuff.
Those short little dopamine hits, as you said.
Yeah. And it is changing culture, right? So what we end up having is people with short attention spans and an economy that serves that. So, for example, in the workplace, we start talking about neurodivergence, and we are normalizing all of this. And I'm not saying we should not make people comfortable, but we should actually question, is this the way we want humanity to evolve into? Or should we actually pause and ask, maybe this is not the right way?
And I wanted to ask you this. I think Nicole and I had a small disagreement about this because she's really trying to move technology forward with all of this mental health situations. But for me, I kind of want to hold back the technology a little bit, and maybe this is me being selfish and my own personal preference, but I don't want to get to a world where an algorithm or a robot is telling me what I like and what to do and what music I should listen to. I would rather like the freedom of my own choice and my own being wrong than living in a world where this is it. This is the right decision. You have to do that decision because that's what your body's telling you. So obviously the world's moving forward with a lot of AI and technology. Where do you see a comfortable balance between real human connection and the evolution of all these things?
Yeah, I do consider this question quite deeply because, as you know, I'm on the advisory board of the biotech that Nicole is building.
And I'm a big advocate of it. So I'm not saying you have to-
Yeah. So although I'm at the forefront of creating, biometrics, AI, and the cultural evolution that evolves from that, personally, I have, how you set boundaries with people?
Yes.
I set boundaries with technology.
Okay.
So, for example, I use ChatGPT, but I never have a conversation with ChatGPT. I use a lot of automations in my business, but that gives me freedom rather than takes me deeper into using technology more. So I intentionally design technology around me that provides more freedom in my life.
Love that.
And that's what technology should do,
It's a tool.
Yeah. When the ape used a stick to, bring down a fruit, it was a tool. It aided in some way. So that relationship to technology hasn't changed. It has evolved to the point where, we have today, and it will continue to evolve. But technology is an evolution of ourselves. If we do not create a healthy relationship with ourselves, we cannot create technology that is healthy.
That we have a healthy relationship with. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have to start with ourselves, and then what we create will have that same qualities.
I think it's very aligned with kind of, obviously in a smaller sense, but like with the app, it's like you're trying your hardest. We always talk about technology and the app being used as a tool. Mm-hmm. It's not meant to like directly find you love. You're not going to find love sitting there messaging someone being like, yep, this is my person. It's using technology as a tool to facilitate us being face to face for this genuine human interaction and connection, because that's where it actually happens.
Yeah, and we're all using the technology and it's changing the world. And I always like to say for first rounds on me, like, technology is amazing. It changes the world for so many beneficial things, like FaceTime. Mm-hmm. You could connect with people around the whole entire world in 2 seconds. I
could call my mum right now in Australia, you know what I mean? It's incredible.
And it's so beautiful. But my personal opinion and preference is technology shouldn't dictate who you fall in love with, and it can't help you form a real connection with another human being. It could assist, but I think, like we're saying, those pheromones, that biology, that neuroscience, I don't want that to go away, and I hope it doesn't go away, because we were saying the asymmetrical beauty is the best beauty because of the imperfections. I think that's love. Like, love is so beautiful because there's so many imperfections. And I wouldn't want a robot to say, you're supposed to fall in love with that person and you have to do this to be happy, and just do it and you'll have a happy life and die.
Takes all the mystery out of it, doesn't it? And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about love and connection is there's so much mystery surrounding it. And as you were saying earlier, it's like your brain and your spirit and your heart have made all these calculations before you even have a conscious thought. So to consistently remind yourself that, like, it's not A to B, it's not black and white. It's so beautifully grey in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm. And that's what keeps love alive, right? So otherwise, if love was same all the time, it would no longer be love, and it'll be dull.
Yeah.
So,
but also like life, right? If we were so advanced and we didn't do anything that bothered us, we wouldn't be happy, because you're happy based off of normalcy or being unhappy, right? Like, you're happy because something's going well.
Yeah.
But if things are always going well, that's not happiness, because it's like the new normal.
It's like a constant state.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the great beauty of even our life cycle, right? You guys probably have heard of, Saturn return, and, whether or not it is true, I don't know. I'm not an astrologist. But you can actually gauge it that way, similar to how I explained the Greek mythology with the 4 different types of love. There are 4 life stages as well. So 0 to 7 is when we're still with parents, and humans have the longest gestation period of any species. Like we some people are still home at 40 with their parents, right?
Yep.
I think 25 is like
Yeah.
the new normal.
Yeah.
That's where I'm from.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a very long gestation period, but between the ages of 0 and 7, we are picking up clues from our parents of what a healthy, stable, secure relationship looks like. And we use those cues as adults to find our partner. Between the ages of 7 and 14, we are rebelling against our parents. We're like, we don't want to be around them, like they're not cool as us, and like all these things happen. We listened to, back when I was growing up, emo music and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're trying to do what's the opposite of our living environment, and that is great because it gives us a new experience. It's necessary. And then from 21 to 28,
Wait, what happens from 14 to 21?
oh, sorry. 14 to 21. Yes,
I was like, oh,
skipped
those
that
7
part.
years don't
Wait a
matter.
second.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. So 14 to 21 is that phase where we are teenagers and we first start to experience dating and we first start to have attraction to someone. And these are the formative periods of our future sexual and life partner, So the rejections we face or the preference we have with women or men, these are things that we develop at that stage. And then 21 to 28, sometimes that can be if someone finds a relationship early, that can be the starting point of a beautiful long relationship, or it could go either way. But a lot of the times in modern culture, that period of time is focused on career. So what we do is we don't feel like we have a say in the world. So we do whatever it takes to become someone. And by the time we become someone, we're in our 30s. And so in that crucial period of time where we could have dedicated to look for someone, we've instead employed that to be someone. And by the time we get there, now people are looking at each other in terms of expectations. Do you qualify in these ways? And because you've developed in a certain way and they've developed in a certain way, now you have tick boxes, right? And that is...
Everybody's got that list, yeah.
That sets you up for failure. So,
But now are you saying it's good or bad to start finding your partner at like 30?
It's harder.
It's harder.
It's harder. So when you're young, anything is possible. The world's your oyster. And so at that point, if you do meet someone, in an average life cycle, and this might seem a little bit harsh, but for women, you probably have about 3 good chances of a long-term relationship before your fertility sort of drops. Men, obviously, it's a little bit longer, but still, if you want family, if you want kids, it's not that much longer because the age gap sort of starts to increase as well and gets a little bit weird. So all of us have that sort of tiny window of opportunity to get it right. Instead of getting it right, we focus on all the other things that distract us from finding true love.
I find that so fascinating that you say that because I feel like there are, I think I could speak probably for a lot of women as well, women who are in their late 20s, early 30s. I'm about to turn 33. And there's this this overwhelming sense of I need to find a love. I've spent so long of my life focusing on my career and developing all of these things, yet they still don't quite make room for love. They're still, they're preaching the fact that this is what they want. They're going on all the dating apps. They're going on 6 dates a week. They're doing all these things. And again, it seems counterintuitive because they're still focusing so much of their energy and time on these outside sources. I just find it so fascinating.
I read something a while back, and I want to hear your perspective on this because it seems like it might be accurate. But it said, on average, a human being will connect with 10 people in the course of their life. And the first 3 people, they'll kind of get a sense of what they like and don't like. And then person 4, 5, and 6 is probably like the most ideal because now they know what they're really looking for. And then if you go past like 4, 5, or 6, you start to compare the rest of the people to 4, 5, and 6, and no one matches up to them. And it's kind of like if you go past meeting 6 people, you miss the boat on what you actually wanted. And maybe that goes in play with as you get older in your 30s and 40s, you're not going to find someone as good as your 20s or 30s.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's trying to meet false expectations. So the other thing you probably already know about pair bonding. Pair bonding is...
Sounds familiar, but...
So when we first fall in love, and if that doesn't work out, we have the most painful heartbreak we'll ever experience.
Still to this day, when I was
18
or 19, I literally was sick for like 9 months. Sick to the point where I had a stomach ache, and I didn't know what was wrong with me because my heart was broken so bad for 9 months.
Yeah.
So sick.
But here's the punchline. That is 100% necessary. It is necessary because when we are growing up as a tribe, if a child loses maybe their mother or their tribe and they're alone in the wild, their chances of survival literally drops to 0. So that is our sense of belonging. And if we are rejected from tribe, that is heartbreaking. And so that evolutionary mechanism still exists today. So if you are falling in love with someone, you are creating a hope and a future with that person. And the moment it is destroyed, your sense of belonging is lost and it hurts. And that is the way it should be, because your chances of survival is reduced to 0 if we're considering in the small child concept. So the first time it happens is painful. The second time it happens, you're probably a little bit more prepared, and you go, oh, I got this. And then it happens again. And you're like, oh, that hurts. And so next time you're a little bit more prepared. And by this time, your guard is going up. And you probably, when the guard is up, your ability to fall in love diminishes as well. And so when you're in the third relationship, you probably are not 100% committed. You're probably gauging.
It sounds like me.
It does. It literally, you're explaining him to a T.
She is my third relationship, like serious relationship. The first one, my heart was broken, and I was like, "Oh shoot, this is like the love of my life."
I'll never recover.
The second one, my heart was broken again.
Yeah.
But I was like, doesn't compare to the first one at all. And then when I met her, I was like, why is my heart not broken, or why is my heart not pulling to her as it did the first two? And the first two, obviously, one was a childhood crush, and the second one, we were not compatible at all. But I was so hesitant, and I was like, why is my heart not pulling to her the way it was pulling to the other two people? And I pushed back so much.
It felt almost like a physical guard up that was
and I was
surrounding
like,
you.
I
That
was like,
took a
maybe
while.
just because we fell in love. It felt so real. But I was like, but I don't have that I don't know, biological sense of, oh, I need this person. And it makes exact sense what you're saying, because I wasn't sure. I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah. So that sort of not being sure, sort of checking the other person out, like vetting, all these things happen. And each time your heart breaks, you pay a vetting tax. I'll call it. I just made that word up.
I like that a lot. I like it a lot.
Yeah. So you do pay this tax. And by the time you have your 6th heartbreak, your ability to fall in love is gone.
Oh, because so that aligns with kind of the...
Yeah, and that's called the pair bonding. So our ability to pair bond is gone by the 5th or the 6th time our heart is broken. And that's kind of tragic, because so many people out there are looking for love, and they've had their hearts broken multiple times, whether they're men or women, it does not matter. When your heart is broken multiple times, you have all this history compiled in some compartment in your brain. And as you said before, we sometimes consider the person we're with and compare them with a previous relationship, or we have high expectations for the next person we meet. And it just makes it impossible to actually be with someone when you're relating to them with like history
With
behind.
all this baggage that you're
Yeah.
holding over your shoulders and trying your hardest to start fresh, and it's quite impossible, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wish we communicated this more with people, just like, and I think that's why communication is so important, because you kind of want people to save those heartbreaks. So if you're in miscommunication with the person you're going on a date with and they don't care about the heartbreak and the date, or the relationship doesn't mean much to them, they're wasting a heartbreak on somebody else. And if you were honest and upfront in the beginning and thought, hey, like, I'm not really into this, I don't really want to lie to you, you're saving that person one of these 3 or 4 really important heartbreaks in life. Because if they waste 5 or 6 heartbreaks on people who didn't really care about them, it's kind of not their fault, and it's selfish on the other people who didn't communicate properly to them.
Yeah.
I think it's also personal responsibility to understand and realize that, like, perhaps in this context, it's not good to continuously just go from relationship to relationship, because the odds are that you're going to get your heart broken. Take some time, figure out who you are, like you were talking about at the very initial steps of our talk here, of finding this love, this self-love, this how do you describe it?
Unconditional
There
love.
you go.
Yeah.
And it's self-serving and self-generating love. And that's when you need to step back and really focus on that before then you go out and get yourself so jaded that you can't fall in love.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you consider it another way, the moment someone goes out and they get rejected, or you are in a breakup and you go, wow, that was fine, and you move on to the next one, like, you've lost the pain that comes from love. And that's when you know there's an inability to fall in love.
Yeah.
So if you've reached that point, my advice would just be what you just described. Find that self-love again. Because once you have that self-generating, then you have the freedom to fall in love over and over again.
I love
I
that.
feel like we've had so many people, and we've talked to so many people being like, just go and love yourself and everything will work itself out. But the way that you just explained it, I hope everybody out there listening, it like really holds on to that, because there's a scientific basis behind it. And so, yeah, to hold on to that thing, it's true that you've only got about 6 of them to go. I think I probably got you around 4 or 5 with me. No, for me.
For you?
So I think it was about
Oh,
4.
wow.
So I was like, right.
I just made it.
Right on the money. you just
Meant to be.
And with dating apps, don't you see this to that point where the way we don't know how to use them is that we're so addicted to them, like social media, where this woman who had 6 dates for you, right? You go on that date, and if it's bad, she doesn't have time to self-reflect because she has 6 more lined up, so that's eliminated. And if it goes well, she doesn't give you the respect and time to see where that can go, because she's got 6 lined up. So no matter if a dating app date goes good or bad, our brains are so programmed to go back on the app that it's a disservice to any situation.
to everybody involved, yeah.
Yeah, and a large part of that is our inability to experience emotion. So we often suppress, reject, or shame different emotions. And that has an effect on our ability to connect. So, for example, in my last breakup, I knew my heart was going to get broken pretty bad. So I actually called Nicole preemptively. I was like, look, in a couple of days, I'm going to be completely destroyed. So, yeah, and I will need someone to talk to. So I had like scheduled that in because I knew the breakup was coming.
You had the wherewithal to understand that that's what
Yeah.
was about to happen.
Yeah. And the crucial thing here is I set myself up with support, and also I gave myself 3 months to grieve. And in 3 months, the grieving hadn't run its course. It actually took 8 months. But I respected that time. So when the grieving process was over, I'm not carrying any previous baggage from,
You've dealt with your emotions.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So when you have this awareness, like, sure, like 8 months seems a long time, but on the long run, if you find the right person and you're unable to connect with them because you're holding back or you're not fully falling in love.
Or healed from part, like you
Yeah.
said.
We took
Then-
a 3-month break, and I didn't date anybody else. I fully sulked in it. And then we met up again, and I was like, oh, we've both evolved and kind of became new people.
We took the time
because we gave ourselves that real time.
We took the time to understand like the areas of which we both need to work on individually if we were ever going to have a successful relationship. And getting back together wasn't the end goal, but I think it was a beautiful byproduct of all of that time you set apart going, all right, it was open-ended. We didn't know when we were going to talk to each other next, but it ended up being 3 months of just solid self-reflection and self-work that obviously now
So
we're
I
married. So it worked out well.
I hate to do this. We should do a part 2.
Oh, yes. We have to
But-
do... this conversation has been so
Yeah, we have to do
fascinating.
part 2
I
of
could
it
talk to you
another
for
time.
hours and hours, but we're to do rapid fire really quickly. Okay,
Yes.
ready? Rapid fire. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning.
Okay. If you weren't a neuroscientist, and I know that we talked about your previous career, what profession would you do?
I would be an explorer on an expedition for National Geographic.
Friggin' love that. The last thing that made you laugh out loud?
Um,
Got it. Just the question alone.
yeah, I laugh very easily. Yeah.
Got a great laugh too.
yeah.
It's quite contagious.
Yeah, my friends often, like if we at a festival or whatever, they say meet at Kaushik's laugh because sometimes it's so loud. People are like, yep, that's right.
I fucking love that
Yeah.
so much. One word that describes your approach to life.
One word.
not telling.
Give full conviction to this moment.
Freaking love that. Favorite leisure activity to unwind?
Working out.
You two have that in common.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite quote that inspires you?
Your heart is responsive to this moment.
Felt that one. My God. And how do you personally practice stress management and self-care? Like what's something that you do for yourself that's real self-loving and self-caring?
For me, the practice is complete devotion to my heart. And that's why the previous question was, what's the quote? Your heart responsive to this moment. That's my own quote. It's written in my book.
I love that.
So that's how I'm devoted to my own heart. And that's my self-practice.
That's so beautiful. So, so beautiful. Dr. Ram, we cannot thank you enough for being here today. Honestly, it was such an eye-opening and interesting conversation. We will have to do a part 2 at some point because I feel like there's so many more questions we
Maybe
could ask.
we'll do Dr. and Nicole. The two of them together. That'd be great.
That's why I married you. You're a thinker.
I'm sure this place will explode when we do that one.
Yes, wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
But if you want to let people know where to find you, and also his book is called The Hidden World, and I'm going to buy it straight after this, so everybody else should.
Yeah, so I'm across all social media except for TikTok, and the handle is Dr. Kaushik Ram, DrKaushikram, and that's on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Incredible.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Doc. This is amazing.
my pleasure.